What's up guys? Welcome back to Tidal Gardens. This video is an update to one of our show tanks. Originally, it was our Euphyllia dominated show tank, but there are some changes since you last saw it. The main thing is, there are no more Euphyllia in here, making it the least Euphyllia dominated Euphyllia show tank ever. This is now a completely Fimbriaphyllia show tank. If you recall a while back, Euphyllia and Fimbriaphyllia were separated into their own genera, so long story short, torch corals stayed in the Euphyllia genus, while hammers and frog spawn got reclassified into a new genus called Fimbriaphyllia. So who cares, right? The naming semantics are not why all the torches got kicked out of this tank. Corals get reclassified all the time. It's not a big deal. Besides, people typically keep mixed reefs, so there isn't this need for that level of strict adherence to monoculture when going about stocking a reef tank. I separated up the Euphyllia from the Fimbriaphyllia because I was having legit aggression issues. People have asked me for years whether you can keep them together and touching. Technically, yes, sure, but that's not really ideal. That kind of goes for a lot of different types of coral. Many of them don't instantly nuke neighboring corals that they touch. Everything on the reef is trying to outcompete everything else growing around it, and these corals are no different. They just happen to have a pretty mild sting, all things considered. The short answer is yes, they could have been kept together. The long answer is that there could be some complications, and right now, given the choice between fewer complications or more, I'm gonna go ahead with fewer, please. This wasn't just purely theoretical. I was noticing more and more that the torches were reaching out and stinging the hammers and frog spawn. Often I would walk by the tank, and a torch would have a sweeper tentacle extended all the way out and hooked onto the body of a neighboring Fimbriaphyllia. Here's an example of it happening in one of our farming systems. I knew that as time goes on, and these corals start to grow into one another, it was going to be more of an issue, not less. These corals all get very big, and with sweeper tentacles, they can extend out further and further, antagonizing everything in the tank. While Euphyllia and Fimbriaphyllia are not the most difficult corals to care for, they're kind of middle of the road. They sometimes mysteriously lose a head here and there. There are different thoughts as to why this might happen. Possibly a bacterial infection, maybe a virus, maybe something that it ate. Either way, having a persistent stinging neighbor isn't helping things. That constant threat of aggression could weaken a colony, and I've had a colony just utterly dissolve overnight. Again, it could be 100% disease related, and aggression plays no part whatsoever. The likelihood is that several factors play a part in these interactions, and by eliminating one variable, it's easier to diagnose problems. When these die-offs happen, they can happen in a hurry. This large colony, for example, died pretty much overnight. There are some whole tank treatments involving antibiotics that could be helpful, or coral dips that are an antibiotic. However, when the die-off happens overnight like this, it's a little late to be doing any kind of acute treatment. And that's kind of why I'm trying to reduce any hostile interactions first. Also, I want to avoid doing whole tank treatments unless I really need to. In terms of aesthetics and aquascape, losing all the torch corals from this tank does leave a bit of a vacuum visually. There were a lot of really cool high-end torches in this aquarium, and now I have to track down some interesting hammers and frog spawn to fill that gap. I would still very much like to keep this a Fimbriaphyllia only tank. I could go with the whole mixed reef thing, but that tends to lead down a path of sameness, and I'm not really looking to do that. We have plenty of other tanks here where we could do mixed reefs, and I would much rather hard commit to a singular aesthetic. The majority of the corals in here are the branching varieties. Being a coral farm, we tend to gravitate more towards corals that are easier to propagate, and branching colonies are preferable to wall-shaped colonies. But for the purposes of a show tank, we could get a few wall varieties in here because it is for aesthetics. It is a display tank. I have also seen people get a little creative with different colors of branching hammer corals and make a hammer bouquet, so to speak. I might give that a try to add some visual interest working with what I already have, but I also think it's cool to have large 20 plus head colonies. Still, it could be a cool change of pace to throw in a couple of bouquets. Food for thought anyways. If you were wondering, the torch corals that were in this tank are now in the Peninsula Show tank, which is along the lines of that mixed reef concept. It's currently consisting of a bunch of random things, a little bit of SPS, a few soft corals, but thinking about it a little bit more, having a Euphyllia dominated theme, those torch corals, could be really cool too. We might move some of the hammers and frog spawn from that aquarium back into this one just to fill up a little bit of the space, or if they're big enough, we can just set them aside for farming. Corals aside, this tank has a lot more going on in the way of fish. In the last video we did of this tank many moons ago, I don't think that there were nearly as many fish. I think there was only maybe a mimic tang and a foxface, maybe a few damsels, but since that time we've added a blue hippo tang, an orange shoulder tang, a few different wrasses like this Timor wrasse, a copperband butterfly, and a few extra damsels to top it off. What I noticed was with more fish in the aquarium, they tend to be a lot more confident and are out a lot more. When there was just that mimic tang and a foxface, they almost never came out. You might see them for just a second or two a day, and for the most part the tank looked completely devoid of fish. So far so good on this fish collection. They don't scrap with each other, and they provide some nice motion to this tank. By the way, that lack of aggression, that is not a small deal. Fish aggression can be a major obstacle. The other day, I added this 1-inch wrasse to a 600-gallon tank, and another 1-inch wrasse that was in there killed it overnight. It was frankly pretty horrific. Fish can be massive jerks to one another, so the fact that all these are playing nice, it's something that I'm not taking for granted at all. Alright, that's it for this update. I wish you all the best with your tanks, and until next time, happy reefing.